The ironic thing, John, is they are the ones who fan the flames of all this Epstein stuff, talking about how the Dems are in the files and they're going to expose all these deep state actors and wealthy liberals. So this is, to some extent, a crisis of their own making. They are the ones who really trained the MAGA diehards to believe that these files were going to expose everything. And now it turns out Donald Trump's the one exposing the files.
Welcome to Power Lines, presented this week by Beehive. I'm John Passantino.
And I'm Oliver Darcy.
Today, the BBC is in chaos following the resignation of its two senior-most figures over a Trump documentary edit. Tucker Carlson is diving even further into the conspiratorial fever swamps, pushing chemtrails. Sydney Sweeney's new movie is bombing at the box office. South Park just took things to a whole new level, and I mean a whole new level. But first, Fox News and MAGA media are effectively blacking out coverage of the Epstein emails that are pulling Trump even further into this mess of his own making. Oliver, it's really good to see you this week. We're back home after our trip to LA. I'm glad to see you made it with air traffic control still in like a total state of mess.
Back after our Netflix auditions. Ted Sarandos is, I hear, going to greenlight that podcast for Netflix.
Anyways, so this week, House Democrats, the House Oversight Committee, released these new emails that are quite damning from Jeffrey Epstein, showing the notorious sex offender say a whole host of things privately. We're getting a first look at these that we've never seen before. In them, he says Trump knew about the girls, direct quote, in a 2019 email. He says actually some really unflattering things about Donald Trump here. He talks about how he's the dog that hasn't barked, wink, wink, nod, nod. He called Trump dirty and demented. He called him borderline insane and effing crazy. He says he had early dementia and that he was photographed with girls in bikinis in my kitchen. There is a lot here. So obviously this, people went wild over this. It was really painting Donald Trump in an unflattering light, raising even more questions about what he has known all this time. Well, of course, in MAGA media, on Fox News, this is an extremely uncomfortable topic. For the first half of the day, when this came out on Wednesday, there was effectively a blackout in coverage. There was really no mention of it on their air, especially through about noon, while every other network was basically going wall to wall with these revelations. It's pretty remarkable. Also, we noted that if you look across the right-wing media space, from Breitbart to the Daily Wire, zero coverage, nothing in the first half of the day here on this. By evening, we saw on Fox Primetime a really vigorous defense of this from like Jesse Waters and others saying this is a hoax, matching up at the White House. I think this really fits right into what we have seen in the past, which is that anytime Donald Trump is met with a scandal or something that implies that he is, perhaps not of the greatest character that he portrays himself to be, that his media allies rush to his defense.
Yeah, I think this is another example of how Fox News is really a propaganda organ for the Trump White House, and it's not at its heart a news organization, because this was obviously the biggest news story of the day. And Fox News, I think through noon, the day this came out, spent a total of 6 seconds on it. And, it obviously was a major story. And if it's like one of these things where it's like, can you imagine if, like, you can do this 100 times with Fox News, thousands of times with Fox News, but literally, can you imagine if the Epstein files came out and it said Joe Biden had spent hours, with one of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein? Can you imagine the coverage that Fox News would provide if the Epstein files came out and it said that Joe Biden knew about the girls, right? And in this case, it's like apparently not a news story for Fox News, and when they do cover it, they cover it as if it's a hoax. It's obviously absurd, and it's just, I think, another data point. It's not. I don't think it's surprising, because this is what they've been doing for years and years with Donald Trump. It's just another data point showing, again, that they are at their heart a MAGA propaganda machine, not a news network.
It was Fox, too, who notably had asked him in the run-up to the election whether or not, if he was president, that he would release these files. And he sort of tacitly said yes. He was sort of uncomfortable with the idea, but was like, yeah, I would do that. Now they're out. Here they are. And the network seems to want to sort of row back from that. Greg Gutfeld, who has a primetime comedy show over there, he said this is a hoax that reveals how absolutely unsalvageable the media is. It's the media's fault somehow. Jesse Waters said that the release has backfired and called it a sleazy leak while they're shutting down the government to give illegal aliens healthcare, which of course is completely bogus and false. But it does speak to the fact that, like, for the, let's say, the MAGA faithful Republicans who continue to get their information from this environment, I imagine they're viewing this as a nothing burger, that this is, if anything, a selective leak that's designed to attack the president, his credibility. But I do think that this is a major problem moving forward, right? Now, the Democrats got their new representative in Arizona sworn in on Wednesday, which means that we are now on the brink of a vote in the coming days for the full House to release these files in full. And it seems like now there's a lot of pressure for Republicans, including those who live and operate in this space, to also get on board with that. And I suspect that this is headed to a very bad place for his media defenders, who are now going to be caught in a really difficult situation, a conundrum of how do I defend him after calling, rallying for years that there's a conspiracy here. And now that they're going to finally come out, I think we're going to be in a really tough place for him.
Yeah, I think one of the ways they're going to defend him is how they did yesterday, which is not offering much coverage of it. Did you see the Sean Hannity clip from last night where Sean Hannity is confronted directly by a guest on why he's not covering the Epstein files? Let's take a look at that.
Trump is all over the Epstein files, and I'm wondering if they're going to release those. Are you covering that tonight?
Not really, because the woman that apparently they're talking about is the one that said he was a gentleman and never did anything wrong. And the person that had a grudge was the guy that got thrown out of Mar-a-Lago 25 years ago. And by the way, when you get thrown out of a club in Palm Beach, Florida, that's kind of a big deal. And it's very humiliating and embarrassing. And he was a convicted pedophile. So I'm not exactly putting a lot of gospel truth in what he said.
Trump was mad.
Really remarkable, but at the same time, not, because Sean Hannity, that's who he is. And these people will do everything they can to cover for him. The ironic thing, John, about this whole situation that the White House is now in is they are the ones who fan the flames of all this Epstein stuff. And we're talking about how the Dems are in the files and they're going to expose all these deep state actors and wealthy liberals and Hollywood, folks. And the person now ensnared in the controversy is none other than the president of the United States, Donald Trump. And so this is, to some extent, a crisis of their own making. They are the ones who really trained the MAGA diehards to believe that these files were going to expose everything, expose the system, very similar to QAnon in some ways. And now it turns out Donald Trump's the one exposing the files.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember, they invited all the MAGA, extremely online MAGA far-right fringe from Twitter or X to the White House earlier this year. That's libs of TikTok, DC Drano, some an OAN figure, all of the best people, invited them to the White House, and they came outside with those binders and they're showing them off. Epstein files, release part 1. Suddenly, they're very quiet about all of this. And you're right. The White House directly courted this as a conspiracy that if you vote for Donald Trump and put him back into the White House, we're going to finally show the elites who have been behind this cabal of pedophilia. We're going to expose them. Now Donald Trump is backpedaling hard. The White House on Wednesday, when these files came out, called it basically nothing. It shows that Donald Trump did nothing wrong, that he's totally innocent, that this is a hoax. But they clearly don't want this out now, and they're in a very difficult position. I think one of the most interesting things here, though, Oliver, was as part of these emails that came out, they show correspondence between Jeffrey Epstein and a whole host of, variety of folks. One of them is the journalist Michael Wolff. He's the one who wrote the Fire and Fury book. He's, been a biographer of Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. He's been very close to these two. He has tapes and recordings of his own that he has talked about for him to do these. This correspondence that has come out, it shows Epstein talking directly to Epstein in here, which is a little uncomfortable, I would say. I think I should say, if you ever emailed with somebody privately, assuming it's never going to come out, you might be embarrassed if your words were put on display for the world. So that said, Wolff was advising Jeffrey Epstein in these emails, which is something we've not really seen journalists do.
Well, one, he tipped off Epstein saying that he heard, so someone at CNN maybe told Michael Wolff this or tipped him off, but Michael Wolff emails Jeffrey Epstein saying he hears CNN is going to ask Donald Trump about his relationship with Epstein during the debate or after the debate when the candidates give their little, not press conferences, but answer questions from the press. And then Epstein replied saying, oh, well, if we had an answer for him, what should it be, basically? And that's when Michael Wolff says, well, I wouldn't craft an answer for him. I would just let him hang himself, because this could give you effective blackmail against Donald Trump, and he will owe you. And I thought that was remarkable, because not only is Michael Wolff tipping off a sex predator, but he's also advising him. I mean, this is crossing the lines between being a journalist, and he's playing Epstein advisor in this instance. And most news organizations, I think, if CNN's Anderson Cooper were to have been advising Jeffrey Epstein, I imagine that he would no longer be on the air, right? If the New York Times had Maggie Haberman advising Jeffrey Epstein, she probably would no longer be writing for that newspaper. This crosses a very red line in journalism. And also, I think most people wouldn't be advising Jeffrey Epstein, given the sex crimes he committed. But outside that, it crosses an obvious journalistic line here. And, it's not to say anyone thinks Michael Wolff is a saint. I think it's well established at this point that he operates outside traditional journalistic norms. But even for him, I'd say providing advice to Jeffrey Epstein, that's a new one for him. I mean, that crosses a certain line.
Yeah, and we reached out to the Daily Beast, where he has a podcast, for comment on this, and they declined comment. But Wolff went on his podcast just today to discuss this, and he addressed it, saying that he often would tell his subjects of his reporting what they wanted to hear. That's how he described it, and so he would do this basically as this sort of cost of doing business. That if he wanted to get reporting out of figures like Jeffrey Epstein or Donald Trump, he had to play act as somebody who was understanding and sympathetic to their views and their plights. And that is the cost of doing business, so that he could write his books and get this reporting out. I can't say, though, that is an ethically safe place to play as a journalist. I think that this is something that it would be a boundary that really is one that, a journalist in a traditional newsroom or that adheres to any set of standards and practices would be, on good ground to do here. Notably, Joanna Coles, who is the editor over there, said that, I've known Michael Wolff for 25 years, and I was surprised by these emails, she said. He also said he was surprised that the emails were coming out, that he had gotten no heads up on them and just sort of woke up like everybody else. And he says, look, I often said what he wanted to hear to Jeffrey Epstein, but I do think that this is going a little far. I don't think that that's ethically, Well, I mean, it's not like Jeffrey Epstein said, Michael, don't you think I'm the best? And he said, yeah, sure, Epstein. He was actually the one in this email exchange, the one who initiated the conversation, tipping off Epstein to the fact that Trump was going to be asked about this. And then he was the one who
followed up with a whole, paragraph of advice. That's not telling someone what they want to hear. I mean, I think in the way, often if as a journalist, you listen to the other party and you kind of nod along as they're talking and let them talk. And that's I think pretty normal, right? You don't interrupt them, you just let them talk and you kind of hear what they're saying. And if someone's divulging information to you, sure, yeah, just take the information. But this is not what that was. This was him actually providing that advice. And I think what Michael Wolff is trying to say is that me serving as almost an aide to Jeffrey Epstein and getting close to him that way allowed me to have more information. But that crosses, that crosses a lot of lines. I mean, that's like basically what James O'Keefe would say, which is like, I lie or I deceive my subjects to get information, and that's the way to do it. And I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be comfortable doing that. I think that most newsrooms would not be comfortable if their reporters were behaving like that. And I think most people probably are fairly appalled that Michael Wolff was helping Jeffrey Epstein with his public relations efforts.
Yeah, I mean, he actually literally says you could use this for your PR efforts, which is remarkable. Look, access journalism is already an uncomfortable thing, and it's an issue that newsrooms contend with. I think here you're seeing how the sausage is made for Michael Wolff in a way that we've never really had a clarity on. How does he get these people to talk to him? How does he get these quotes and access in his books that have always raised questions like, is this real? Is this this is incredible information? Well, I think what we're seeing here for the first time is how Michael Wolff becomes a part of their world and earns their trust by, in some ways, offering help to them or becoming part of their thinking and sort of getting into their good graces. In this case, it's with Jeffrey Epstein, arguably the world's most notorious, sex offender and predator here. But it does, I think, raise a whole host of questions. I still think that it's a very uncomfortable situation for the Daily Beast, which continues to employ him. And
well, I also imagine I have a hard time imagining that if any other reporter at the Daily Beast were to have been caught up in messages like this, that they'd be employed by the Daily Beast. I think to some extent, Michael Wolff gets away with a lot of this stuff because he's Michael Wolff. And he's just a reporter or a journalist who's been able to get away with operating outside the traditional lines. There's a couple people like that, and he is one of them. And what's remarkable to me is that people still give him access. Like he just did that David Zaslav profile this year. Like, why? If you're, I don't understand why you would be a major, powerful player and be giving him access, but he still continues to get access. So.
Yeah, we asked his publisher for his books, Crown Publishing, for comment, and they also did not respond. So, all right. Well, when we come back, the BBC is in turmoil after its two senior-most leaders resigned over a Trump edit.
Let me take a quick minute to tell you about the platform we use to run Status. It's called Beehive, and I've got a special offer for readers coming up. But first, here's a little background on why Beehive was right for Status. When I started this newsletter, I needed a platform that could grow with us, something powerful enough for serious publishers, but simple enough to build without a large team of engineers or designers.
That's exactly what we found with Beehive. It was built by the same team behind Morning Brew, so they understand what it takes to grow an audience and build a real business around your work. Since launching, two things have made a huge difference. First, our newsletter actually reaches people because the deliverability is outstanding. We don't really have to worry about spam filters anymore. Second, the paid subscription setup is incredibly easy. This is where you can charge for access to your newsletter. Beehive handles payments, subscriber management, all of it. That lets us stay focused on the journalism while the platform turns our work into a sustainable business.
Whether you're an independent writer or running a larger publication, Beehive gives you everything in one place. A clean editor, a website for your publication, powerful growth tools like referrals and recommendations, and multiple ways to make money from day one. If you're thinking about starting a newsletter or switching platforms, Beehive is offering Status readers 30% off your first 3 months with code STATUS30.
Visit beehive.com/status. That's BEEHIIV.com/status and start building your newsletter today. Welcome back. So Oliver, this week, the BBC is in, I would say, historic turmoil after an edit of their documentary show Panorama last year, which was profiling Donald Trump, the January 6th attack. In this documentary, they stitched together effectively two separate remarks that Trump had made, like 50 minutes apart or so, in which he's telling members of who are rallying there, the faithful, that we're going to go to the Capitol. Why don't we just actually show a clip?
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. Now it is up to Congress to confront this egregious assault on our democracy. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them. But I said, something's wrong here. Something's really wrong. Can't have happened. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
So as you can see there, they put together two separate statements. This has led to some serious turmoil within the network, shocking everybody this week. The BBC's Director General, Tim Davie, and the news chief of BBC News, Deborah Turness, resigned earlier. No one was expecting this to happen, and it's led to some serious turmoil within the network. Donald Trump, of course, is emboldened by all of this and has publicly been attacking the network as, as biased and lying and all these things. It's a pretty remarkable moment, and it's really unclear what is going to happen next here. What do you make of this?
Well, I think it's another news organization under tremendous pressure from Donald Trump. One, I was surprised that the news chiefs or the heads of the BBC resigned over this. It seemed like something you would apologize for, issue a correction. It seems like something you would have done months ago when this thing actually aired, or I guess a year ago when this thing actually aired, versus it being causing trouble now. But I was surprised that I thought that was a bit of an overreaction that the heads of the BBC would resign over this. It seems like this is an error made on a program. They could say, we have high standards here, we apologize, we correct, etc., and move on. But that took it to another level. And the strange thing is they still haven't really addressed the actual edit yet, which is the thing that they should probably just have corrected. And now they're under tremendous pressure from Donald Trump to, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I don't know really what he wants. He got the heads of the BBC to resign. So I feel like it's pretty good in terms of like getting, extracting blood for him. But it remains to be seen, I guess, what the BBC is going to do. I don't know. What do you think they're going to do, John? What can they give?
So there's this Friday evening deadline that Donald Trump has set. He is saying that if you do not offer a full retraction of this documentary, that he's going to sue for what he says is $1 billion. That's obviously it's outrageous. It's also very questionable whether or not there's even a court that has jurisdiction to hear this claim. He's doing this out of Florida. This obviously happened in the UK. The Panorama documentary didn't even air in the United States, okay? And then the online BBC player in which you can watch this sort of thing is basically digitally walled so that you can only watch it in the United Kingdom. You can't even watch the BBC iPlayer in the United States without some VPN that fakes your location, okay? So it's highly questionable whether or not anybody was actually harmed. And as far as anybody knows, there were no complaints about this documentary a year ago when it actually aired. So I think that this is an obscene overreaction by the BBC, right? And all that it has done is now raised it into the public spotlight and done the opposite of what these leaders had hoped to do, which is to say, we are a fair arbiter of information. We are a trusted place, because instead, by resigning, all they do now is feed this narrative that wrongdoing happened and it went all the way to the top. I'm shocked that they didn't just say, look, this producer who worked on this production company that was involved, the editors are no longer with us, or, that there's been some disciplinary action, some new guardrails have been put into place, because this is not our standard. And unlike a lot of these, MAGA supporting outlets that are out there, we actually have editorial standards. And we don't stand by this. This is something that should not have gone out, or there should have been some on-screen disclaimer that showed you that there was like a change in time. To be fair, this sort of thing is not, this is not how a piece of video should be cut for an audience, right? It should be more transparent that he's making these statements at separate times. But the point, you sort of get the point, which is that in the moments before the January 6th attack, that he was out there on this stage rallying his people, who then did go to the Capitol and attack it.
That's the thing.
Let's be honest, that actually happened.
He did incite the insurrection. It's not like he didn't incite the insurrection. He's the one that was there telling him, go to the Capitol. And he did say at another point, we're going to fight like hell or whatever. I mean, he did say these things.
And in the months leading up to the attack, he was telling them and repeatedly feeding lies about the election being stolen, and that, his vice president at the time had the ability to not sign the electors, and that he would remain president. I mean, completely deranged stuff. So, with all of that in mind, I think it's outrageous that the BBC's senior-most leaders who run the network and who run the news division would step down over this. All that it does is hand Trump the hand that he wants and emboldens him. And now you just see the demands going even further. Now he wants even more, and he wants $1 billion, which the BBC is funded by ratepayers who pay a license fee for if you have a television at your house. So are the British people supposed to pay Donald Trump $1 billion because of this edit that, again, happened a year ago and no one noticed? Well,
I don't even understand, though. I maybe I'm just naive here. I don't really understand what it is that he wants. They're obviously going to issue some sort of correction here. I'm sure they're going to do that. The heads of the BBC have already resigned.
Right.
Not entirely sure what more Donald Trump wants. I mean, can you imagine if this were happening, let's say, at, CBS News or whatever, I guess this did kind of happen. The head of CBS News did leave and the head of 60 Minutes did leave. So, but that was a lot, right? That was a lot. I don't know. I don't know what more he wants. I think that this is kind of him just deciding to exert pressure where he knows that they're, to maybe intimidate the BBC more out of future coverage, possibly, and to scare them away from covering him in a aggressive manner. But honestly, the BBC wasn't really even doing that in the first place. So this whole thing's a little absurd. It's not like the BBC is this sharp-edged, aggressive outlet holding Trump to account. It's pretty both sidesy, I'd say. It's pretty, dry copy. And so this whole thing, I think, is just a little bit silly. But
no, this is the playbook
he does.
That Donald Trump has used repeatedly at U.S. outlets. He did it with CBS, where he sued over an edit of the Kamala Harris interview on 60 Minutes, which everyone said, including legal experts, was a completely bogus lawsuit. And they paid him out on it as a settlement in order to get their Skydance Paramount merger deal done. We saw him file a lawsuit against ABC with George Stephanopoulos. ABC settled that suit. He's now suing the Wall Street Journal for $2 billion now over its reporting about Jeffrey Epstein, which we know was a legitimate report showing that, gross, lewd drawing that he had made for that birthday card and signed his name to for Jeffrey Epstein. This is what he does. And in the case of Rupert Murdoch, they have not backed down, at least that we know of publicly. They have not settled that lawsuit. They're currently, I guess they're going to fight this out, it seems. But the BBC now is the latest target of this campaign of legal threats and legal attacks. And it's a great way for him to rally his base against the ultimate enemy, which he has always said is not the Democrats, it's the media, right? If there's no media, if there's no truth and there's no facts, then you could just believe whatever you want. And that's what he wants. And that's what he's always been after. And this is a great time for him to do that with the BBC now, one of the world's largest news organizations, an institution that has provided facts and ground reporting and truth the world over. And we're in this moment now where the network now is rudderless without its two senior-most figures. And there are questions that behind the scenes, there was a coup that took place here on the BBC's board with members who are conservative, one of whom was involved in the founding of GB News, which is a sort of Fox News version of alternate right-wing conservatism reality that's in Great Britain. And there are new questions now whether or not this network is going to be able to continue to stand up, or if this is just like many times that the BBC has been through the ringer for its coverage. It's always sort of fought over and controversial because no one's happy because everybody's paying their share, their quarter to keep the channel on the air. Whether or not this is just, another, let's say, speed bump in that. All right, well, when we come back, South Park is taking it to a whole new level with Trump and Vance in bed together, and Tucker Carlson is now promoting chemtrails on his show. All right, we're back. Oliver, this week, South Park is back again. They're continuing this season, which has been filled with hilarious moments, especially with Donald Trump and his relationship with Satan. It's incredible. This week, they're back with an episode where J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are now in bed together. They're in the Lincoln bedroom. You have to see it. Let's play a clip. Oh my God. Wow.
Hard to know what to say about that. That's a whole new level for South Park.
Wow. That is creative freedom if I've ever seen it. Holy moly.
That is unlimited. That is what unlimited creative freedom looks like.
Wow.
David Ellison at Paramount must be watching this and just getting immense heartburn because he obviously wanted to give them creative freedom, but I don't know if he ever envisioned this.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, look, it's I'm like speechless. It is hilarious. It's where this whole storyline was inevitably going all season long. But I do think that, as you bring up with David Ellison, I think that this brings up a really good point, which is South Park and Comedy Central, they're part of Paramount. They're now under, let's say, more conservative ownership with David Ellison and his father, Larry, who's good friend, close with Donald Trump. Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the creative brilliance behind this show, they were interviewed recently in the New York Times, and they talked about how they were able to sort of get away with this, especially since there's so many questions over whether or not Paramount under Ellison is gonna, let's say, be a little softer on Trump, a little easier. And we're watching the two of them now in bed. I mean, they're having sex with each other, okay?
I know when they started the season, I thought it seemed like they were touching the third rail almost when they were talking about Trump's penis size.
Yeah.
And now that almost looks tame compared to what we just saw. If for people who are listening, it's a graphic depiction of J.D. Vance and Donald Trump making love in bed in the Lincoln bedroom at the White House. With Lincoln looking on, from his portrait at the whole scene.
Yeah. Lincoln has quite a view there.
But this is what they said. They said they want to do, and I think this gets to the heart of who Trey
Parker and Matt Stone.
Trey Parker and Matt Stone, who they are. They talk about this in the New York Times, how when they sense there's a taboo out there, when they sense there's a third rail, that just makes them want to touch it more. And knowing that Donald Trump is deemed off limits because of his, henchmen in the government over at the FCC threatening people for not being nice enough to Donald Trump, knowing that context, having that context, now all they want to do is push the envelope further and further and further. And they openly said this to the New York Times last week.
Exactly. And I think the thing that was interesting about this interview is they say, look, it's not that we got political. People are viewing it that way. It's that politics became pop culture. That's what Trey Parker said. And I think there's something there to that, right? Like this is the sort of thing that everybody is talking about. Donald Trump and JD Vance in the White House. And now obviously they are taking it to a whole other level.
I don't know if anyone is quite talking about this, John.
They want to crush taboos, right? And so they say we're attracted to that like flies on honey. And so if there's taboo, we want to go there. But I will say, I do think to David Ellison's credit, between this, allowing this to go out, and re-signing Jon Stewart to the The Daily Show for another year.
Jon Stewart at the Daily Wire, that would be bit of a slip there. That would be very interesting too.
I do think that to his credit, he is allowing the comedy and the needling of Donald Trump to still flow on Comedy Central. And maybe that's because you can sort of, put that into the shoebox of, well, it's a comedy channel. That's what these guys do. Or
it's also a channel that Donald Trump does not watch, right? If this were happening on broadcast television, I think it'd be a totally different story. If Jon Stewart were on CBS late night, I think Donald Trump would be very triggered by that. If South Park were airing on CBS, if this aired on CBS, can you imagine what Donald Trump would do? I'm not really sure Donald Trump knows how to find Comedy Central on the dial. It's just not part of his routine. And so I think they can get away with a lot more there than they would if this was on a regular channel that Donald Trump frequented.
Yeah. Speaking of channels that he doesn't watch, supposedly, Tucker Carlson, who has his video podcast, this week after he had Nick Fuentes on his show, the notorious white supremacist, sparking intense backlash and hand-wringing within the conservative movement, this week he had a full conversation about chemtrails. Let's take a look at the clip.
It's always the obvious questions that are so vigorously discouraged. And one of the questions that's been the most discouraged over the past 30 years are, what are those lines in the sky that you see trailing jets? What is that? Some people call them chemtrails, claim that somehow the U.S. government is spraying poison on the population. Those people are clearly crazy. Wikipedia calls them crazy. Every news outlet calls them crazy. But the trails are still there. And it's clearly not water vapor, because that doesn't make sense at all. So what are they?
There's sprayed particulate dispersion. There is no theory in this equation. In New York, one of the world's most renowned testing institutions, we found exactly what we knew we would find, starting with aluminum nanoparticles. Bioavailable freeform aluminum is toxic to all life, period. That element is named in numerous climate engineering patents as part of a geoengineering dispersion element. So again, there's no theory involved in any of this.
So first of all, that was Dave Wigington. He is a conspiracy theorist. First of all, just to say it out loud, it actually is water vapor that is coming out of airplanes that are flying overhead. That, like, just baseline, that is actually what is happening here. But everything that's being said here about it being aluminum that's poisoning the public, that's complete nonsense. What?
Well, it's amazing how he does this. He's taking the thing about, like, I am just asking questions to, a whole new level here with this chemtrails thing. I mean, obviously Tucker Carlson's a smart guy. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows. I don't believe that he believes that the government is spraying the population with poison via jets in the sky. I don't think that's something that Tucker Carlson actually believes. But he is willing to entertain these kooky conspiracy theories, some of them more dangerous than others, because I think he wants an audience. He's desperate for attention. And the problem for him is he keeps pushing the envelope further and further and further. And the only way to get attention is by going further and further and further. He's almost like the South Park creators. He has to find a new taboo every single week to get attention. And I think that's what he's doing here. Unfortunately, a lot of people listen to Tucker Carlson and believe the things he's saying. And so that, and this has been a persistent conspiracy theory, the chemtrails conspiracy theory, for many, many years. And Tucker Carlson giving it credence, I think, is going to persuade, maybe you could argue, poison people's minds into believing that the government is actually behaving in this weird way. And by the way, what Tucker Carlson doesn't say, and I'd be curious to know, if he actually thinks the government is poisoning people via jets, I guess that means Donald Trump is in on it. Donald Trump is the one poisoning everyone. You don't hear him say that, but he is the man leading the federal government. And, that's something to throw out there as well.
I think that's exactly right. I think he's doing this because he knows that if you court controversy, people will be talking about you. And he's happy to do that to, continue to gain popularity, gain followers, gain viewers, and therefore, make money off of this, profit off of it. And I think that is what we're seeing between what he did with Nick Fuentes, where he offered him a softball interview. And now I think that's what we're seeing with things like chemtrails, which have long been debunked, and they're a joke, but trying to put a sort of, is this actually real? I went and investigated it myself by bringing a conspiracy theorist on.
It took 6 months, he said, to find this expert to bring on the show. This man is really trying to get that Golden Globe. He is working really hard for that Golden Globe from Jay Penske.
I've actually forgot about that.
This is the clip they're going to show when he wins the Golden Globe for Best Podcast. It's going to be the chemtrails clip, followed by, I guess, Nick Fuentes and who knows what else.
But I think what this is going to do is it's going to make a substantial portion of the MAGA base who listen to Tucker Carlson, who trust him, who are listening to this and to this man, Wigington, who says that the point of chemtrails is to destabilize the food supply, destabilize rain, and therefore the population. There's this more sinister thing that authorities, the government, is trying to basically, like you said, poison you and to control you, and that these sinister forces are out there. And so that leads you to the question of like, oh boy, well, what are we going to do about this, right? We need to do something about this. This is a real problem. And this is how you get that conspiratorial thinking that leads you to where we are, where you have a government in many ways that is run by somebody who has promoted conspiracy theories repeatedly over the years. And that thinking is a key part of our politics in 2025. And I think that this is, Tucker Carlson is now playing a key role in doing that. He's, in fact, I think, unseated Alex Jones in that space. You don't even hear about Alex Jones, aside from like the Sandy Hook lawsuit stuff, having any sort of influence. Even though he's been platformed again by Elon Musk, he's hanging out on Twitter and tweeting things all the time. It's Tucker Carlson who's like, you know what? I'm just going to go there. And who cares if it's bullshit?
He has that Fox News sheen still on him. Mm-hmm. And so he's considered to be more mainstream and acceptable. He's the one that speaks at the RNC for Donald Trump. He's perceived differently by the public, and he's covered differently by the press. And we've talked about this a number of times. Anytime the New York Times covers Alex Jones, it's right-wing conspiracy theorist at the front, right? Quick label, the public knows exactly who he is. When you talk about Tucker Carlson, most news organizations still, for whatever reason, they call him the former Fox News host, Tucker Carlson, right? And that gives them some level of credibility to people who might not understand how far Tucker Carlson has gone. And so I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. The reason, or one of the reasons that he is, I guess, so dangerous is because people view him as a reasonable mainstream figure, whereas they've always viewed Alex Jones as that kooky guy on the internet ranting and raving.
It's a good point. And I think the same is true in some ways, though not to the extent with Megyn Kelly and her former life at NBC and Fox News. And she's definitely a gateway into this world where you sort of start buying into it. There's a veneer of credibility. She's a fair-minded journalist. And the same thing is true for Tucker Carlson. And in a way you go into chemtrails and white supremacy. I mean, it's totally bonkers.
It's not even a rabbit hole anymore because there's no hole. It's just there, right? It's just like you just walk in the door and it's right there. It's not even hidden. It's in plain sight.
So anyways, this week also, Sydney Sweeney's new movie came out. It's called Christie. Did you see it?
I did not. I was not one of the very few who decided to go to theaters to see this one, John.
Yeah. Well, it turns out not very many people saw it. It earned $1.3 million its opening weekend, but it was released in over 2,000 theaters, which makes this one of the top 10 all-time worst opening films that are widely released.
I think it was 13. It was number 13. It was number 13 in terms of worst openings of all time. But if you look at that list, a number of those films were released during the pandemic. And I don't think that should count. So if you discard the pandemic films, like no one was seeing anything in theaters when the pandemic was happening, if you discard that, it is in the top 10.
So it did not do great. $1.3 million in 2,000 theaters is pretty epic, especially for a star like Sydney Sweeney, who everybody's been talking about for the last several months for, a couple of reasons. One of which is this controversy around the American Eagle ads, jeans ad campaign, which really drew everybody in on both sides of the aisle. At first, it felt like a very manufactured controversy, and I actually think it sort of was. But it really then became a front and center mainstream culture, lightning rod. And I'm a little surprised that after all of that, she could not get more than $1.3 million in an opening weekend for a film. And she's done a full press circuit over this, right? She's done a full
press circuit, but she's not done a good job addressing the American Eagle jeans controversy scandal. I think we have actually video of that. Let's take a listen to what she told GQ and then come back.
Is there something that you want to say about the ad itself? The Sydney Sweeney has great jeans. Do you have...
The ad spoke for itself.
You think the ad spoke for itself?
Yeah.
Okay. And the criticism of the content, which was basically that maybe specifically in this political climate, like white people shouldn't joke about genetic superiority. Like that was kind of like the criticism, broadly speaking. And since you are talking about this, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that specifically.
I think that when I have an issue that I want to speak about, people will hear.
Kind of a surprising response, I'd say, from her. Like, given the opportunity, she must have known these questions are coming, John, right? Like, it's not like this is the obvious thing you're going to ask Sydney Sweeney if you're on set with her. And it seemed like she didn't have a really, you would think her, like, this is going to be there's going to be a lot of attention on her answer here. And it didn't seem like she had crafted an answer that was strong in any way.
I think that she was media trained for this. I think that everything she said there of when I'm ready to speak, or no, I don't bring my phone on set, I didn't see some of this stuff, all of that is a way to dodge to try to address this.
But not in a good way. That's the thing. It's not like she was media trained and executed that plan. Like I thought the same thing when she said, I thought the ad spoke for itself. I thought when she said the ad spoke for itself, I thought, okay, so her publicist told her the ad spoke for itself. And then like you said, you didn't have your phone on set. You were too busy really to pay attention to it, which is absurd. Everyone was talking about this, including the president. She was definitely aware of it and paying attention to it. And the third thing of like, when I have something to say, I'll let you know. Those are obviously it just seemed like she was trained on those fronts, but like she didn't even deliver these talking points very well, which is surprising because she's an actress. And you would think that she would have maybe rehearsed how she's going to respond to this. But it just struck me as like, she's like totally unaware of the firestorm that ad caused, and like how people might be, like how this might have damaged, I think, her brand in the public eye. And I wonder with this movie bombing, Christy, whether they're starting to wake up to the fact that maybe we should have addressed this a little more head on versus letting it fester and then not having a good response, an authentic response when we're asked about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that what she was doing here was trying to dodge, right? You put all of these answers together. I didn't see it. When I'm ready to say something about it, I will. The ad speaks for itself. What is she saying here? She's dodging. She doesn't want to talk about this.
She sounds like Mike Johnson.
But yeah, exactly.
I haven't seen the video, but I'll let you know about it. Like that's what it sounds like.
I'm going to watch it right after we're done with this interview.
Right.
I think actually the GQ reporter here did a fantastic job at asking these questions. This is tough to do, especially on camera. But what is the downside, I guess, to Sydney Sweeney saying, look, people are portraying this as a white supremacist thing, that white genes are superior. What is the downside to her saying, you know what, that wasn't my intention. I worked with really great people on this, and American Eagle, that was not the intention of any of this. And if anybody felt that way, I want you to know that that's not true. In fact, I love people of color, blah, blah, blah. She could have done that and put it to bed. Instead, she courts continued controversy, which suggests then that those who have continued to view this through the prism of white supremacy with this genetic superiority are not going to go quiet now. It's almost like she continues to say, you guys can go ahead and say that. And we've seen MAGA celebrate her in the fever swamps online, sort of portraying her as the face of whiteness. And I can't imagine that's good for her brand. And I can't imagine for a film that just came out like this one. It's an independent film, so it's not like a big, let's say, 20th Century Fox big film that we're going to see everywhere. But it was in 2,000 theaters, and no one showed up. And I do think that does harm her, and it does suggest that people are not clamoring to go out there and support her in the movie theater right now.
It seems like she's turned off a lot of her audience. I mean, that just seems very clear. And she's like this. It almost seems like, I think we were when the ad controversy first broke out, we were like, this is pretty absurd or whatever. And I still think it was pretty absurd. As you mentioned, certain people perceived it in a certain way, and it became bigger than the ad, right? Like it became much bigger than the actual Sydney Sweeney has great genes ad. And it seems like she's almost flirting with that crowd. Like she's like not like willing to disavow that crowd. And that seems like a very easy thing for someone like her to do. She could say, of course, I'm not racist. I have no racist bones in my body. If anyone actually was using that ad in such a way, I totally disavow that. They do not speak for me. In fact, the opposite. And I just think that she could have been very forceful and actually stood for something. Instead, she's kind of like, I don't know if she's in over her head or if she actually is a little MAGA and likes some of this stuff. I don't know what it is, but it's not good. And it's certainly not helping her, I think, in the public eye. And by the way, John, it's not like she is getting treated with the most kid gloves. It's not like she's like on Anderson Cooper's show getting a real grilling here. She's like, the interviewer is very kindly saying, I want to give you the opportunity to address this, obviously. And she's kind of like, huh? No. And it's like, I find the whole thing very strange.
It sure is. And I do think that it's a mistake on her behalf. I think that she should, if people are out there saying about you that you are the face of what is, a racist white superiority view or campaign, you should come out and say that's not true. If that's not true, you should let people know about it. There's
not
no
true and
downside
offensive.
to that.
And offensive. It's not true. It's totally offensive. I am not speaking for these people. I don't like these people.
Yep.
And they have nothing to do with me. And that's all she has to say. And it's strange that she is afraid, apparently, of alienating that audience. I don't really get it. It's very strange.
Yeah, especially against the backdrop. I think you know, too, against the backdrop of previous reporting that she is a registered Republican and that, I think it was her mother who had a birthday party and they were wearing red caps that sort of resembled MAGA, but it was like make birthdays great again or something like that. It was like a joke. But you put all that together and it sends a signal. And the extremely online, young guy, MAGA red-pilled base has been using her face online repeatedly as
Fox News has posted dozens and dozens of Instagrams with Sydney Sweeney. Every time she does anything now, Fox News celebrates it. And there's a reason they're doing this. And there's a reason the Fox News audience likes Sydney Sweeney now. And, that's fine. Like, let the Fox News audience like her or whatever. But I think that it gets into bad territory when the openly racist crowd likes you.
Yep. I think you're right. I think it's a mistake, and I think she should address it. And it's clear that people are not reacting positively to it. Well, that's it for us this week. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Power Lines. Oliver, I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to Power Lines, a presentation of Status, and a special thank you to Beehive for sponsoring this episode. The show is produced by Matt Havia and Antonio Enriquez in association with In the Arena Studios. Please like, share, and subscribe to Power Lines on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen, and watch full episodes and clips on our YouTube page at Status.